Hi there. So recruitment can often feel like an uphill battle for small and medium businesses and not-for-profits who have fewer resources and less name recognition than big employers. So what can you do about this? A discussion about recruitment for you is coming up right now. Hi, I'm Andrea, and this is the HR Hub. This particular episode is part of my series around HR for small and medium businesses. Others, of course, may find it helpful as well. Please subscribe or connect on LinkedIn, or better still, do both. Then you're going to see the rest in the series. So let's start with a quick, and I mean quick, overview of the full cycle recruitment process. Whether you've heard the words full cycle or not doesn't really matter, but it does encompass the idea that there are a number of phases in the recruitment process. And the first one is preparation. Like so many things in HR and probably everywhere else, preparation is just so important. And I encourage you to invest as much as you can at this step until your anxiety to get the posting up is overwhelming and you just can't help yourself. But at this step, you will review the job description if you have one and consider, does it really represent what you want? Does it have all the skills? And once you have that in place and a good idea of what you want out of the role, then you write the job ad. In that, consider the elements of fit. I get asked about that a lot, and I will talk about it a bit more towards the end of this episode. So then remember that the job ad and the job description are not the same thing. A lot of people will just slap up the job description, but a job ad is more like the cover of a book where it's beautiful, it's engaging, you want to learn more, whereas the job description is more like the table of contents. It gives you a lot more detail about the nature of the job, but it's pretty dry. So let's keep moving. The next step in the process is sourcing. You can reach out to candidates online, typically via LinkedIn, where you start the process. You can ask your employees to make referrals, or you can post your job ad on job boards like Indeed or LinkedIn, or you can do all of those things. Consider the job boards that are in your space that may target just exactly the people you're looking for. The next step is that once you have some candidates, then you have to screen them against the criteria you first identified in the first step. First, you're going to whittle down your hopefully not giant stack of resumes. And there are ways to speed that up if you've got an applicant tracking system or even with Indeed. And then you'll conduct some phone screens to identify who you really want to bring in. And then, of course, is what we mostly think about when we're talking about recruitment, which is the selection process or the interview. And for best results in the interview process, you need to create a standardized interview you give to all candidates so that you can make a proper comparison. It would also help to have a second interviewer so you can discuss what you've heard and make sure that, you aren't biased in some way or misunderstood something. Then you get to the hiring process. First, you make your verbal offer, and then you send the offer letter. It can be an email. And this is the step when typically the negotiation may happen. And last step, but not least, is onboarding. In my experience, where employers are falling down most often is with the first step of preparation or the last one with onboarding. And if you don't onboard properly, there's so much evidence out there that you're going to have quick departures or worse, disgruntled employees. I know that onboarding can feel like a chore or that you just have so many more important or interesting things to do. But in the interest of retention, there really isn't that much more that's important. If you're having retention problems, pay attention here. You've just invested a ton of money in bringing that person into the organization. Do you really want to waste it? So that was quick. There is a limited amount of detail I can go into here. And there's a limited number of questions I can answer, but I'm going to answer some I get a lot. And the first is, how do I compete with larger organizations for talent when they're so much more recognized than I am? Okay, so this is definitely possible for you to do, and here are a few tips. The first is consider those things you can offer that larger employers can't. Then promote the heck out of it. Flexibility in hours, flexibility in duties, variety in duties. One that is pretty effective is purpose, impact, and meaning. It's often a lot closer to the individual in a smaller organization than it is in a bigger one. Then you might also be able to offer more personal growth opportunities, especially if you're growing rapidly. One thing I like and discovered not that long ago is developing an employee value proposition and owning your employer brand. If you can do this and become a recognizable entity amongst all the noise that's in the job market, then what you have to offer becomes more sharp and clear to your targeted applicants. And you can also use this elsewhere, like you can even promote it with your existing employees. Of course, developing an EVP is time consuming, but it is so effective at helping you make your case. The next question I get a lot is around the cost of advertising, and employers are worried about this and want to manage it closely. Generally speaking, it isn't that great. We're talking a few $100s for a position. Now, I guess that could really add up if you have a high level of turnover and you're constantly posting. But if you do have a high level of turnover, then you should be looking into the cause of that. So some ways of minimizing the advertising cost is to advertise on your own social media and your website. Put them in a newsletter if you have one. All of this stuff is free. You can post on Indeed for free, but the visibility of your posting is going to decrease a lot as time passes. The way to prevent that from happening is to sponsor the job, which means you pay up to a set amount every day to increase its visibility and get the number of applicants you want. But then you can also adjust that as you go to manage your costs. LinkedIn's approach is similar. With them, you can post one job for free at any given point with some limitations. Over time, it too is going to become less visible to potential applicants. And after a certain number of applications, it's going to automatically pause. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is timing. Everyone, no exceptions, wants the posting to go up quickly, to come down quickly. We need somebody next week, but don't underestimate the time it takes. If you think back about the full cycle recruitment, which I reviewed at the beginning, you can imagine that each of these steps takes some time. The American Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, says the average length for the process from a job posting to a job offer that's been accepted is 42 days. That's almost a month and a half, and it excludes the preparation and the employee notice period, which could quite reasonably add on another month, considering the typical notice period for an employee is 2 weeks. So this takes time, and when you can plan for it. Often you can't because someone hands in their resignation and you got to move as fast as possible. So some things that can still help speed it up are having up-to-date job descriptions from which you can draft the job ad. An applicant tracking system can cut days out of the process and also have the advantage of making recruitment less, administratively demanding. You can also go back to past recruitment efforts and see if any of the candidates you had before might be suitable this time. Efforts like an EVP and employer branding can also speed up the process, but those are investments you would make well before you are recruiting for a particular position. So another way you can save time is by interviewing candidates who are clearly an amazing fit as soon as they come in. Now, that does have downsides because then you can't compare them properly to ones that might have come in later. But you have to balance at that point, the importance of getting a good hire versus the chance of getting a great one. So also, if you treat it like a project and block time for interviews well in advance, you might save a few days there too, instead of getting to the end of the job posting period and discover that a key decision maker is out of town. I know that's a pet peeve for recruiters out there too. So once the job ad is active, any delay in the process can run you a risk of losing a great candidate. So it is in your interest, both, for efficiency reasons and for getting that great candidate, to go through the process quickly. If you think that person is great, chances are very good someone else is going to think they're great too. So the final question I'm going to address, and which also comes up a fair bit, is how to assess someone's fit for the role and for the organization. We all know that fit, the vibe, whatever you want to call it, it matters. Although I'm going to caution around aiming for too much of the same. Fit should not mean that this person looks like you and especially thinks like you. A lack of diversity and tension is not a recipe for business success. Some ways of assessing fit are to define your most critical values and culture, and then ask the candidate to provide examples of when they've demonstrated that behavior at work. Do this in the interview and rate their answer in comparison to others. As I said earlier, using more than one interviewer will also help assess fit. You can also ask them to meet the team and see what your team thinks. Reference checks here can also be informative, even if they are a bit controversial. I know most of the recruiters I've ever had on my show think they are not worth the effort. So that is the end of this episode, and that's all I have time to cover today. Of course, no series for small and medium businesses on HR would have been complete without a discussion of recruitment. And as I said at the beginning, please subscribe and connect on LinkedIn, and so you can see what's coming up next. And we will see you next time.